ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back here. Michael Cohen on Sports Talk Nation. As we move along in our opening day previews, we now move on to the New York Mets, who begin their play here on this Thursday against the Pittsburgh Pirates at 1 o'clock. It's going to be a big game over at Citi Field. And oddly enough, after what was a roller coaster offseason where the Mets said goodbye to a number of very important pieces to their roster, players who have been big contributors to the team for many years, like Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Starling Marte, all those guys now gone from the team. The Mets come into this season pretty much a brand new baseball team. You look at their lineup today compared to what it was just a year ago, outside of Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto and Francisco Alvarez, it is practically an entirely new team. And I'll be completely honest with you. I think that the expectations in the fan base are totally split. There are fans who are very cautious, who don't have very high expectations at all. And then there are fans who have ridiculous expectations and are trying to read too far into the tea leaves as far as stats are concerned and trying to project that, hey, look, this team has potential, which it does, to do some big things this year and could be a playoff team. In fact, it's gotten so crazy. Just the other day, the New York Post putting out its annual preseason preview, and five of the six writers in here have the Mets winning the division. In fact, all six have them going to the playoffs this year, and even ESPN has the Mets going to the playoffs as an NL East champion. I say let's pump the brakes just a little bit because I have questions. I have concerns going into the season. This team, to me, really has to earn the trust of this fan base after what was, as I said, a roller coaster offseason where we're now being introduced to a number of players who, other than we're familiar with them with other teams, we don't know how they're going to gel together here in 2026. And this was a franchise just last year with the previous clubhouse that had a lot of problems. So I say let's pump the brakes on the expectations that may be too lofty as far as playoffs are concerned, and let's just see how this team pans out over the course of the season. That's probably trying to be fair. Now, the one thing that gives Mets fans some reason for hope this year is that the starting rotation on paper at the top of the rotation is better than it was last year. Last year was a hodgepodge of different pitchers. You really never knew who was going to be that guy who was going to step up and try to turn things around. It was totally inconsistent. This year, you know who it's going to be. It's going to be Freddy Peralta, and it's going to be Noah McLean. McLean, of course, coming up late last season, second half of the year, was fantastic down the stretch for the Mets, really was their best pitcher, and the expectations for him are very high. In fact, a lot of people think that he could become that type of pitcher, that like a Seaver, a Doc Gooden, a Jacob deGrom, who's going to be a must-see event every single time he toes the rubber. And he had a very solid spring training, did very well for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. Obviously, last year, 5-1 to 2.06 ERA. Even though Freddy Peralta is going to be your opening day starter and is considered your ace, Noah McLean, this is his chance to shine for the Mets, and this is really his staff in my mind. But as far as Peralta is concerned, that was the big move that I think changed the opinion of a lot of people for the Mets this year, because you're getting a guy who has ace stuff in Milwaukee. A 2.70 ERA last year for the Brewers, 204 strikeouts, a whip of 1.08. You go through, especially over the last 3 years, has consistently pitched 165-plus innings each of the last 3 years, and has been over 170 each of the last 2 years. He has been the model of consistency year in and year out. Now, does that mean it's going to be perfect? Do I think that a perfect situation? Not necessarily, because you look at the end of Freddy Peralta's season last year. Yeah, there were a little bit of holes there towards the end of his stay with Milwaukee last year. In September, he had a 3.52 ERA, got hit a little bit. Playoffs, he didn't pitch that well either, losing a couple of games, one to the Cubs, one to the Dodgers. I will say this, the one red flag that I do have on Peralta this year is this, and it's not nothing against him, it's just the nature of the sport. Back in the day, of course, if you're talking about an ace, you have them go pitch 7, 8, sometimes 9 innings a game. Well, last year, his longest outing of the year was 8 innings, and he only did that once, and that was the second start of the year against Kansas City last April. Since then, was basically a 5 or 6 inning pitcher every time he went out there for the Brewers. So I think that's something just to take note of as we get ready for this upcoming season. That Peralta, yes, is your guy. He is going to be your staff ace, but that's why it's so important to have Noah McLean there as your 1A. And that's really the difference for the Mets this year compared to recent years, especially last year, where they didn't have a 1 and they didn't have a 1A. This year, they feel good that they do. The rest of the rotation, as far as I am concerned, is really you can throw it up in the air and try to hope that something lands. Clay Holmes, you would hope that he picks up where he left off last year, was a solid starter last year for the Mets. You hope he could pick it up this year and continue that. After that, it's a question mark. David Peterson had a solid run at times last year and then fell apart in the second half of the year. Kodai Senga the last 2 years has dealt with injuries and hasn't pitched well. Sean Manaea off to a very rough start in spring training this year. Velocity was down and now has been relegated to the bullpen. That's a $25 million man relegated to the bullpen this year to start the season for the Mets in Sean Manaea. So those are things like that do worry me with regards to the Mets pitching staff. They are very top front. They're very much focused on those top 2 guys, and after that, well, it's anyone's guess what happens after that. And that leads into the bullpen, of course, with Devin Williams, now the closer, no longer Edwin Diaz. I have concerns there. Look, the Mets are hoping that Devin Williams has this year in 2026 the kind of year that Edwin Diaz had in 2022 when he just figured it out. Of course, Williams was with the Yankees last year, had a horrible season last year, ended up losing the closer's role to David Bednar, and now here he is with the Mets. It's a worrisome move for me. It really is, because you have the best closer in baseball in Edwin Diaz. He took up $3 million more than what the Mets had offered him. I think it was $69 million he took from the Dodgers. Mets offered $66. I hear Met fans, I see them on Twitter all the time going, hey, Edwin Diaz is a traitor, he's a snake. I don't think so. Mets kind of lowballed him on that move, on that signing, and Edwin Diaz made a business decision, and his business decision was to go to a team that has the best chance to win it all, and that, of course, is the team that's won it all each of the last 2 years, unfortunately, with the Dodgers. So for the Mets, they lose the best closer in baseball, and now you have to hope that Devin Williams can make up the loss. And that's something that we have to pay attention to this year. This is why I'm not highly optimistic, guys. This is why when I see these predictions of Mets winning the NL East and being a serious playoff team, I just don't know right now. I just don't see it at this moment. And then when you take a look at the rest of the lineup, again, outside of Lindor, outside of Soto, it's really a new crop of players that you have to hope David Stearns gets right and Steve Cohen got right, that they're bringing these guys together. And, of course, I'm talking about guys like Jorge Polanco, who's going to be a DH and also going to, I assume, play a strong amount of time at first base with Brett Beatty, kind of a platoon, if you will. You're going to have Bo Bichette over there at third base. You're going to have Marcus Semien now at second base. Semien, let's just start there. I mean, look, Semien's now 35 going on 36. Each of the last 2 years, his average and his production has gone down. 276 batting average, 348 on-base percentage in 2023 in Texas, and then 237, 308 in 2024, and then 230, last season with Texas. His production continues to slip. Last year, only 15 home runs, 62 RBIs. I'm not saying he isn't a good player. He was a good player earlier in his career, but this is a concern for me as far as Marcus Semien at second base to start the season. As I said, Jorge Polanco at first base. Now, Polanco had a good spring training, and he played well at first, but again, this is going to be his first extended opportunity in the regular season to play first base. And it's a position he's never played before. So that also worries me going into the season. I know he's a good hitter. Last year had a great year. He had 265 in Seattle, had 26 home runs, his best home run output since 2021 when he was with the Twins. He's a good hitter. I understand that. He has a good power hitter. you're losing so much by not having Pete Alonso here. Okay? I don't want to hear, I know there's a number of Met fans out there who want to dunk on Pete Alonso because he signed a big contract with the Orioles, because he had a contract offer from the Mets a couple of years ago that he rejected. I understand that. Okay? We all know he did that. He rejected it. And then the Mets, after back and forth from each of the last 2 years, decided we're not going to continue this negotiation. We're letting him move on. I understand that there's maybe some sour grapes there, but you lost an incredible offensive performer in Pete Alonso. 38 home runs last year. He is your all-time home run leader, and he's no longer here. That's a huge loss. How are you going to make that up is the question, okay? Does Jorge Polanco pick up where he left off in Seattle last year? Is he going to play 138 games this year like he did last year? I think that's a fair question, isn't it? Is he going to be a major success at first base? And that also leads to Brett Baty. Brett Baty is in a situation where he needs to show he can step up this year. Whether it's playing short, whether it's playing third base, whether it's playing first base, whatever position they're going to put him in, he also has to step up offensively as well. He has shown signs of it in his career, especially last year at times, but still hasn't really come together as a full offensive force in this lineup. And then that also leads into another guy that is, in my mind, in a big year this year, and it's Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos 2 years ago, when the Mets went to the playoffs and went to the NLCS, was unbelievable. We all thought this guy had arrived, right? And then last year, nothing. 233 average, didn't get going until September, and even then, it wasn't enough. What's his role going to be in this team? Does he play well enough that he takes time away from Polanco or Baty? Does he return to the form he had a couple of years ago? And if he doesn't, do the Mets try to trade him away? Can they trade him away? What's his value going to be? So these are things that I have to ask as questions, and I think you have to ask as questions if you are Met fans. So that's where we are right now with this. I mean, look, again, Vientos, if we can get the Mark Vientos of 2024 with 27 home runs, 71 RBIs, and 110 hits, if the Mets get him this year, they'll be fine. But they have to have that kind of player. They have to have that kind of player show up. The one big move that I really like this offseason, and I think he'll be a good player for the Mets, is Bo Bichette. Now, it's basically a one-year deal at $42 million, which is crazy. But he's going to get that amount to play third base. He has always been a solid hitter throughout his career. He's a 294. He's around 300 hitter when he was with Toronto. Even though he got injured last year, still hit at 311 last season, then contributed in the World Series as well. He's a good player, a good defensive player. I know he's a shortstop, and he's moving to third, but you know what? We've seen, as I said before, we've seen guys go from short to third and third to short so many times. Cal Ripken Jr., Alex Rodriguez. It's been done before. I'm not worried about Bo Bichette at all. I think he will do very well for the Mets over there at third base. And then finally, there's Luis Robert. He was another big acquisition in the offseason, a player who has had so much potential, terrific speed in the outfield, very fast in the base paths, but he has had issues trying to stay healthy, and he has had issues trying to be a consistent enough hitter. A few years ago, in 2023, he hit 264, had 38 home runs and 80 RBIs for the White Sox. He looked like he was on his way to becoming a big-time player, but again, injuries, inconsistency, inability to stay healthy and stay on the field really has hurt him in the last 2 years. Can the Mets, and the Mets took it slow with him this year in spring training, can the Mets find a way to get the best of Luis Robert here in 2026? And that's really the key for the Mets this year, and with regards to all these guys. They have to find ways to get the best out of all these additions they made. They need the best of Jorge Polanco. They need the best of Marcus Semien. They need the best of Luis Robert going into the season, the best of Brett Baty, and the best of Mark Vientos going into the season. Now, the one thing that you do have to feel good about with the Mets is this. They have guys coming, and one of the guys that is coming from minor leagues is Carson Bang. This guy is one of the top prospects in Major League Baseball, one of the top prospects in the Mets farm system. A tremendous spring training for Carson, who hit 366 in spring training, earned his way onto the team, and he will be the right fielder for your New York Mets here in 2026. You look at his numbers, last year had a meteoric rise through the minor league system, went from single A to double A to triple A all in one season. Now in triple A, only played in 24 games last year in triple A, late in the year hit 178, but he hit 317 in double A. Okay, 8 home runs, 23 RBIs, that was in 32 games. And 60 games in high A, he hit 302. Is he ready for this big jump? The Mets believe he is. They have given him every opportunity. He won it out of spring training. And I'm fascinated to watch this guy because if the Mets are out there looking for new stars, because obviously the old stars like Alonso, Nimmo, those guys are now gone. You're looking for new stars. You got one potentially in the starting rotation in Nolan McLean. Do you have one in Carson Beng at right field? That's going to be the big question. But he's in the only one. I mean, as we have questions about positions, like first base and second base and certainly third base, there are guys coming. Certainly Ryan Clifford is a player who's going to be in AAA this year, a player to watch moving forward this year. Jacob Reamer is the third baseman. You got Mitch Voigt down there. You have players that are coming up through the system. And the Mets had, if you remember last season, were graded with one of the best minor league systems in all of baseball last year. So there are prospects that aren't here yet, that maybe did not make this team coming out of spring training, that could, at some point over the course of the year, have an impact on this team. So you have to sit. So it's going to be, I think, kind of a transition year. I don't think that this is a team that's ready to win a World Series right now. It's certainly, I don't know if it's a team that's ready to be a playoff team right now. Not saying it can't happen. I just don't think on paper right now it's ready yet. I think it's a transition year from what was the past to what could be the future here for the Mets, right? With some of these young prospects that are coming. So when I look at the Mets right now in the NL East, I still think Philadelphia is the cream of the crop, but then of course you have Atlanta down there as well. I think the Mets are probably third place, maybe even second place if they can get some, if they can surprise a little bit and get some wins that maybe they aren't expected over the course of the year and get off to a good start or have a good finish rather. They could be a second place team and be in contention for the postseason. But right now, if you ask me, I think it's asking a lot. I think this is a team that has a lot of question marks going into the season. It's a team that we gotta learn who this new group is as a fan base. We gotta learn who this new group is as people who follow the New York Mets. So I think it's not unfair to say, at the moment, let's pump the brakes on the expectations and let's see what happens here in 2026. It was a rough off season. It was painful to watch this off season, but now the season is here, and now we have to see how this thing plays out. I have my concerns. I have questions about a number of players in this team. But now we'll have to see if the work that David Stearns and Steve Cohen did this year is actually going to pay off in a long run. So my prediction for the Mets in 2026, I'm going to say 84 wins, third place in the NL East. But of course, that's coming with a caveat from the standpoint that it could change over the course of the year if more players come up through the system that could have an impact. Like and subscribe. We'll talk to you next time.